Okay, I will call the meeting to order, and online we have Andrew Marcel and Christina Thrun, and then in the room we have Paula Winter, Louisa Gerasimo, Steve Yan, Bob Cook, Ann Wodarczyk, and me, Chris Corpola. And then we have, and I indicated Diane was out today. So I would look for a motion to approve the minutes from 3/12. All right, and a second? All right, any discussion, additions, or corrections? Otherwise, all those in favor signify by saying aye. All right, minutes are approved. Next item, update on possible integration of Health Done Right Housing Action Team, which was tasked to the Education and Advocacy Group. So, Paula? I don't see the red. Yeah, I can't hear you. There you go.
There we go. Somebody picked it up by the handle again.
It was me.
Oh, guilty, huh? All right, so the leaders of HAT and myself, we met and talked about what this potentially could look like. It was determined that a survey would be completed by HAT, and that was completed, and I believe the results were
unanimous that we should go forward as a combined group. There were a few concerns expressed in comments, but I think they're all things that we can address as we go forward. But
Sure.
basically everybody who responded said, yeah, it would make sense. We can find a way to get the two missions are very closely aligned anyway. So fewer meetings, maybe more impact.
Right. So especially since we're covering a lot of the same topics here with the housing and education advocacy. So that would be our recommendation, is that that's approved by this committee if it needs to be approved.
Okay, so let's just talk about, I think you guys had a conversation about this too, but about do we move to change things to formally make them members of this work group? Are they simply adjunct members of the education and advocacy group? Was there any discussion about what their membership looks like?
I would love to bring in public health on this discussion because the Housing Action Team, also known as HAT, came out of the Community Health Needs Assessment. Since 2019, housing has appeared in the top 5. So that is why we have a Housing Action Team, and it was made up of some county representation, but also mostly people from the public who have an interest in housing, as well as people in industry. So they're really kind of different groups, and I don't know if we wanted to sundown one or sundown the other. We didn't actually get into who sponsors this, and maybe we should have in that conversation. Do you have thoughts about that, Kristen?
I don't have strong thoughts. I mean, I think that it could be either way. I don't know. If I'm just thinking off the top of my head, if we make them formally part of the work group, I don't know that it changes anything. I mean, one way or the other, I don't know that it changes. The only thing that would be accomplished by making them part of the work group would be that they would be able to claim a per diem if they're not reimbursed in some other capacity. I don't know if you've got anyone who's.
Yeah, I mean, the Housing Action Team is fully volunteer. We don't, nobody's been ever offered any compensation other than we did have some small gift cards that were given for people who had lived experience, who would come and explain to us about like how they ended up homeless and how they got back into, roof over their head and what that process was like. But the people who have mainly attended have represented, churches, they're builders or real estate agents or nonprofits. So I'm not sure that would be a necessity. I guess what I would suggest here is that we table who owns it until we get a chance to talk to KT, because we are about to release our next community health needs assessment, which we did in partnership with Eau Claire and Chippewa counties. And for us in Dunn County, housing is again in the top 5 and came up quite a lot during community conversations. So my feeling is there will there probably should be something that is connected to that, but maybe it doesn't look the same as it has in the past. So if it's possible, we could maybe push that off until next month and have an opportunity to talk to KT about that. I think that would be a good idea.
Okay, can I task you with that to circle back to her? So in the
Yeah, sure.
meantime, in whichever, if the housing, I mean, I don't know that we need a formal vote from this group. Is there anyone who doesn't think it's a good idea to include the HAT group with the sub-work group of the, yes. So I would say if you guys meet, just to invite and include them, add them to your invitation list.
We would have Supervisor Quinn and Supervisor Hagan that are now, would be part of that. So we would have two that would need probably per diem. So I don't know if that makes a difference.
That's fine.
That would be okay.
Yep, that's fine. Okay, any additional updates from the education and advocacy work group? Subgroup?
Well, we have information regarding our project that we were working on. So do you want to hear
Yeah,
that?
yep.
Okay. All right. So we did meet last Friday afternoon. It was a sunny afternoon. It was really hard to be inside for 2 hours on a sunny Friday afternoon, but we did meet and we talked about the goal of being able to educate and talk about opportunities with housing in Dunn County. And we included the Chippewa Valley as part of that because we know that, developers and those other stakeholders or partners are also in Chippewa Valley, not just Dunn County. So looking at how do we globally educate people on the needs and the opportunities. And so we spent quite a bit of time revisiting the housing study, certain sections of that to really know what those recommendations were and what our next steps with that might be. We went through a handout that Louise had shared with us. You don't have to live here, why housing messages are backfiring and 10 things we can do about it. So we really looked at the ways to be able to move some of the education and advocacy. And then we spent our last portion of the time brainstorming on different areas that we could do with education. And it was just more of a popcorn thing of putting them on stickies and then moving from there. At that time, it was really close to 4 o'clock and we decided that our energy had been spent. So we have a really nice long list of a whole page of ideas of things to be able to do. And so I sent out a doodle poll to see when we can meet next in the next few weeks here to be able to then put some of these things on the calendar and say what can be things we can build upon or what does that look like, some really great ideas. The one thing I do want to share as well is that Bill from Grow was there as part of this. And he shared that they have committed, it's a grassroots agency, and Louisa probably knows more about it than I do, but they have committed that they will come into Dunn County and knock on 2,000 doors.
1,000.
Or 1,000? I thought it was
My
2,000.
mistake. I said 2,000. He said they already knocked on 1,000 regionally, but they have focused on Dunn County because of the housing issue. It's do you remember what it stands for? Grassroots Organization of Western Wisconsin. So 2 W's at the end, GROW. They are nonpartisan. They spent a lot of time listening to their neighbors last year. And housing came up a lot at doorsteps when they were knocking on doors. So it would be interesting if they can, regularly show up because I think they have a nibble that they can take, which is to start that asking people questions and getting them thinking about this, which I think is very useful. 1,000 doors is a lot in Dunn County, so that was impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was like, wow, that would be a huge step. And then we talked about everything from media to presentations, talked about the types of opportunities that we could discuss regarding funding opportunities and then also the needs and what that would look like. So hopefully we'll be able to come next meeting with a nice calendar of the identified strategies for the next year. That was our strategy for the meeting, was to develop that calendar, and that's as far as we got. But our big goal was to educate on issues and opportunities.
So a couple of just suggestions. One would be to loop in Krista Vind, because she can maybe do some content creation for you. And then also kind of related to that, you could do, if you wanted to do some community engagement, and you could do some surveying and embed surveys in in social media post kind of stuff. It doesn't, its reach isn't, to every corner of the county or to
Sure.
every individual in the county. But if you wanted to get some ideas about some feedback, that would be Chris, and Krista would be
Help
able
with
to help
that.
with them.
Thank you. We also identified Doug Mell as somebody that we could
Yep.
also partner with as.
Absolutely.
So lots of different ideas. So we'll keep you informed as we move further.
Can I just add a couple quick updates from my side, since HAT is sort of sunsetting? I did give a presentation at the Wisconsin Ideas Conference in Madison a week ago. And that was really interesting because I was one of the first people to do a breakout. So we came right after the speeches at the beginning. And I would say 3 out of 4 of the speakers mentioned housing as being a serious problem for Wisconsin. And a week before that, I went to the Rural Economic Summit for Wisconsin, and swear to God, housing was on everybody's lips. So we are out ahead of many of our other rural counties. The presentation I gave was called Moving the Needle on Rural Housing, using Dunn County as an example of, baby steps, where we started, what we're doing, start with data, get that study done, find out how much land you actually have, get a group meeting at the county level with our county representatives, people who are from the townships, talk to your neighbors. So we've done a bunch of the things that are recommended for getting something going in housing. Take a look at your codes, take a look at your plan, reduce barriers for developers, don't make things so hard, decomplicate. So we've done a lot of things, and I just wanted to mention that I'm really proud of us as a small rural county that we are as far as we are in this process. It sometimes feels like we are just, it's like a never ending ball of yarn with a lot of snarls in it. It's like you pull a string, it's attached to something else, there's a knot there, you get de-energized. But it was really energizing hearing people talk about the stuff that they've got going on in their area. And I came back feeling actually pretty heartened that we're working on this. It may not be perfect, but we are beginning to move the needle. And I think it'll probably take a generation before we see actual results from the decisions that are being made in the next 5 years here at the county level.
And Supervisor Quinn was also there. I don't know if there's anything that we've missed that he wants to share.
No, I think that's a good summary. It was a good meeting and a good step forward, I think.
Thank you.
Krista, if I may.
Go ahead, Bob.
Tony Christopherson from Elk Mound pointed out to me, Red Cedar, we know how critical it is for housing, and I'm sure Tanner and Menominee, the ones closest to the city, realize that there is not any housing available. But I don't know if the outlying towns fully understand. And Tony pointed it out to me that the sheriff's department is shorthanded. So they actually hired a deputy from Montana. And the only place he could find a rent was in Elk Mound. Now, if that person wasn't hired, what would the response time be to the outlying towns for either safety or fire or, anything like that? So the outlying towns share a burden in this also, because the sheriff's deputy, he didn't care where he lived as long as he's in the county. But if he takes that place, there's no room for the next guy. I mean, there just weren't many houses available in Elk Mound either. So I don't know if do we need to approach maybe the WTA, Wisconsin Towns Association? Because that brings in, normally we have about 15 towns at that meeting. If that would be something that someone would like to speak to about that's more intelligent than I am.
Sure, we can put that on our list. We did, one of the ideas was to go to the town meetings and to talk about these various issues and opportunities and those types of things. And, Greg Quinn brought up that there's many things that may get in the way because there's things that are going on, such as a notice that came out about, yes,
Appraised land values. Yeah, we've got that notice as farmers. There's a meeting actually, I think tomorrow or the next day in our township about that. So levy rates and how much your farmland is being taxed, I think is what you were talking about.
Talking about, and some misunderstanding with that. And so, how sometimes you have to start like at the beginning where people are at. And so how do we address that so that they know, that their taxes aren't doubling or those kinds of things. And so, maybe we meet them where they're at and then add to that by some of the education here with what we're working on or what opportunities they have for them. So that was part of the discussions that we had and identified.
And Bob, thanks for bringing that up. When I had a chance to talk to the principal at Boyceville, he said it's really difficult for him to get teachers and other staff people there because there's literally no place to put them. So he's got people who are commuting 30 or 40 minutes. And he said those are the people who are the first to leave if they can find a job where they can live close to where they're teaching. And right now there's no teachers. Minnesota's hiring people from the Philippines. I just heard this on public radio yesterday. So they can't find anybody to teach and they want their classroom staffed. So all of these things are connected. And if we want, a solid economy here and we want our kids to have education, we do have to address the housing. And I think bringing in the, as you say, the outlying townships is also really important. We cannot forget our more rural neighbors. I know a lot of things tend to be Menominee centric, but this is an issue that affects everybody. And the Boyceville principal was, he was just like, you would not believe how hard it is to get somebody. He's like, I used to have 100 applicants for something and now I've got 2 and one of them's not qualified. So it's kind of frustrating.
I think I could add to that as well. I just had a conversation this morning with the ADRC manager, and she talked about the caregiving situation of how challenging it is to find caregivers in the area and or, the employees to work in caregiving situations, and how the housing really impacts that because families are not able to be near their loved ones. And so she talked about the importance of being able to bring in small houses or these apartments for people and what that could do for the caregiving situations of families. So I think our spectrum is so wide, and really taking a look at that impact on so many different levels is important as part of the housing education and advocacy.
Well, and I think as much as like Louisa said that the solutions will take a generation to craft, the crash with lack of solutions will take some time as well. But it's already the one gentleman from the Wisconsin, I think he's Wisconsin Realtors Association, but anyways, like it's a barn on fire, it's a 5-alarm fire emergency kind of thing. But we don't see it as that. But when you think, so recently I saw a data point that said by 2040, which is 15 years from now, there are some counties in the northern part of the state, interspersed throughout the state, but largely in the northern part of the state, where 1 in 4 people will be over 75. And then if you think about maybe 1 in 4 people being under 20 or 18 or whatever, it leaves half of the population able to work in any kind of a capacity, as well as caregiver capacity. And those are generally lesser paying jobs. And, how it all converges into kind of a perfect storm, if you were to say.
Right. And I want to make sure that I'm not misunderstood. When I say that it'll take a generation to shift this, I don't mean we shouldn't take action now, or we shouldn't do anything that could have immediate results. I think the accessory dwelling units, while there's pushback against that from R1 or Ag about, how it might take up space or might change the tenor of something that we have already devised to be a certain kind of area. If we don't do something simple that could add a serious number of houses to people who are under the most pressure, which includes caregivers, then we're missing the boat. We're going to have to do as much as we can in small bites. That doesn't give you 10,000 places for people to live, but it addresses the people who have a adult disabled child or need grandparents in to babysit because we're so short on childcare. And we can't do nothing. If we do nothing, it'll take more than a generation to shift it, and our economy will suffer, and we're going to lose what makes us Dunn County and what we're also proud of. And I think I want to be careful when I say it takes a generation to shift. I'm not saying that we shouldn't make action. I'm just saying that each one of these actions, just like the rules that were passed many, many decades ago, we're now in the spot of unintended consequences that we still have to take action. We can't just ignore this. It's not something we can kick down that can't be kicked any farther down the road, because things will just get worse. And then we're starting to feel that 5-alarm fire. People who cannot get healthcare people hired for, the small number of places that we have left serving our residents for healthcare. If they can't hire people, then we're going to be like the Dakotas, or we're going to be like Montana, where it's a 75-minute trip to the nearest hospital. And I think that's not something any of us want to see.
Okay. Anything else for that group? Otherwise, I'll move along. Somebody got something to say?
I was just going to ask a question, because since Louisa brought up the ADUs, has there been any talk from the advocacy group about presenting to the board of supervisors, or our group presenting something to them about what we've been doing? We do have an ADU hearing tomorrow. If the PRND approves some form of allowing ADUs in zoning, this will be going to the board of supervisors, and if they're not seeing a need for housing, I think this might stall out. So I just kind of wanted to ask that.
I think we'd like to, if somebody wanted to give us the opportunity. I don't know that we've been apprised to like when that should be. Folks do know about tomorrow. I have a doctor's appointment first thing in the morning. I will be here as quick as I can. I may not be able to give any kind of comment. My thought was today, while I'm staffing a booth at Stout, I might try and write something up. Can I deliver that in the morning? Is
Yeah,
that,
you can send it by email.
yeah, okay.
Public comment.
And who do I send it to? To you? Okay, I'll try and get that done. Are you going to be there tomorrow?
I did not look at my schedule yet, but I know Tracy Fisher, the ADRC manager, said that she would be willing to write something up or testify if her schedule allows it. So if that's appropriate, as regarding the caregiver situation. So I could have her, if she's not available to speak, I could have her write it up and
Quick
send it to
email?
you. Yeah.
As far as the full board, I'm not familiar with when would be the appropriate time to do that.
So because we have a new board being seated tonight,
I will be there for that.
all right, because we have that group coming on board tonight, and because we have some education pieces and some orientation stuff that's happening over the next months with that group, I think I would defer maybe to Supervisor Quinn and see, because he asked for an update of this work group tomorrow for PRND. And I think if maybe a side conversation with Diane and Tom around if there's, I think the message to the board has to have some thought and crafting, because for whatever reason, it's controversial.
Because there's 10 ways for your messages to fall flat. At least 10 ways, maybe more.
Yeah, I think the question I've had in my mind is, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow and whether or not the committee will take action or simply say, let's keep working on it. I mean, it clearly, there's a fair amount of opposition, especially in the residential zones right now. And so you have to think about mitigating that through better communication before you try and push through something that people don't want. But the committee may decide to amend the proposed ordinance to include fewer areas, or it may decide to take no action and say that we need to have more discussion. in which case the work of this committee becomes part of how do we have that discussion? And how do we reach out to people so that when we do make a decision, we're better informed?
So I have not been, I guess, haven't been paying attention to like what the opposition is specifically to the ADUs. So it's anticipated to have a lot of opposition tomorrow at that meeting?
Well, the first hearing, I would say there was, it's one of these things where we've talked about it in committee, and Ann has done, and staff have done this great job of amending and modifying, and you think everybody in the world knows about it, and I think we even presented to the Towns Association and notified everybody, but there are clearly folks who either haven't thought through it, or I think have good, reasonable arguments as to why ADUs in R1 and R2 in particular are raise problems. And it has to do with a lot of things, but primarily I think it has to do, well, one of the things it has to do with is water quality. I mean, some of these, most of the R1 areas in the towns are around, in the county are, in the rural areas are around the city, around the lake in particular. They're already very small lots. ADUs do put pressure on the septic systems. It's not an unrealistic concern to worry that we would have some problems there. So that's the biggest thing, I think. But I was a little surprised to see that some of the more rural towns also expressed some concern about ADUs in general ag. And I think that is a good discussion to have, because it gets to all of the points that we just raised about what do we want, how do we want to address the needs of the community, what do we want our landscape to look like. And the committee may decide to go ahead, and then we'll have that discussion at the county board. But I think we would probably want to do a little bit of, I agree with Chris that we can't rush it to the county board. It would be best to have it happen in a ways down the road a little bit. That's the arguments have been water quality, the smallness of the lots, sort of not my backyard stuff is clearly part of it. In residential, and in general ag, the arguments have been, there are many people that have come in general ag and said, we want this. This would help us and our families, and having the right to do this would be a beneficial thing to us. But I don't think that it's been really thought about too much by the supervisors and the town board members and some of the residents. And so there's sort of this knee-jerk reaction of we don't want to densify our general ag areas. There's no way that ADUs would do that, but that's the impression that some people have. Okay. This is a good discussion, and it fits in well with Ann's plan to do discussions about the comprehensive land use plan, because this is the sort of thing that you talk about when you talk about that. What do you want? What do you want your area to look like? How much density do you want to have? Does this sort of accommodation make sense to the kind of community you want to live in? And bring up all the questions that we just went through.
And I can't be there tomorrow morning. It's at 8:30, right? We've got, we have another thing going on here, but I will see if I have someone who can speak on behalf of our government affairs in support of it. If not, I will get you a letter in support to distribute as well from the association.
Yeah, that sounds great. Just email it on over.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on what Tom just said. From what I see, the towns are very slow to respond to what's going on with the county, because I've been aware of this ADU thing for quite some time. You've seen me there, Tom.
Yep.
And from what I'm hearing from the towns that I've talked to that are opposed to ADUs is they don't want anything on an acre or less, less than 1 acre.
Right.
They don't want any ADUs because that's generally around the water area. And water quality and aesthetics are very important reasons why they don't want it there, along with space. It's difficult to fit something else additional on a less than 1 acre parcel. And I think a lot of it is fear of pressure from developers and realtors buying up lake lots or something and putting an ADU on it so they can get more money out of it. And that's what I'm hearing a lot of.
No, I agree.
What was that, Tom?
I agree with you. That's exactly right, Bob.
Yep. I don't think anything's going to happen tomorrow. I think there's going to be more opposition from the towns that were opposed to it before. But as far as general ag, I think it's a perfect fit. It has worked well in the past.
And most of us who grew up rural tell you almost every farm I can think of from my childhood had additional dwelling units or accessory dwelling units,
Or a third one.
or sometimes more than one. Yeah, because it was used to be
Hired help.
called the hired hand or the hired help, and also grandparents.
Mhm.
Multiple generations living together is how human beings have been living together for millions of years. Well, maybe not millions. We haven't been around that long, but
look at our
creatures live together in family groupings, and that, only allowing one house on a 1 acre lot is a kind of new and somewhat artificial way to create a living situation, whereas living together on a farm there's a lot of good reasons to have a few more people there.
And look at our
housed.
building structures today versus what we had back then, Louisa. Nobody lived in a single story house back then. They were all 2-story. Many of them had a summer kitchen just to try to keep the heat out of the house because we had 2 families living in there and possibly a hired man besides. We don't build that structure anymore, but it would work today.
Yeah, and also there are people living in remodeled chicken coops and sheep barns and all of that as well. And the point being, when things were less regulated, people did what they could to create shelter. They could create pretty affordable shelter when they needed to. And now we have some things that are constraining us, and those rules are for good reasons. Like, we came up with them as a society for a reason. We don't want to pollute our water. We don't want to chop up our productive ag land into a bunch of little pieces. We don't want noise. We don't want crowding. I mean, there's lots of reasons why we created the rules, but all these rules together have become such a barrier that now we got no place for, we're thousands of units short. This is not a small thing that has happened. It's not to be laid at the feet of anybody. And I think everybody who passed the rules in the past passed them for very good reasons. And I'm not saying those reasons should be thrown out, but we better get creative and think about what the needs are of our community and the ag community that's still trying to work the land. It's not really that easy to do all that work by yourself. So it's good to have options where you can have a family member or a hired person come back and help you as we age, especially.
Is there the
But you can
ordinance that,
turn your mic on, Rob.
oh, isn't it on?
Nope.
Oh, now can you hear it?
Yep.
Okay. Is the ordinance available to look at, Ann, or is there something that's put out for the meeting tomorrow for what's going to be looked at? Is that available?
So all of the draft ordinance versions, every time we have a PRD hearing, these are posted on our public meeting calendar. So that's right on the Dunn County's main webpage. So tomorrow would be April 17th. If you just clicked on the PRD link, that'll bring you to all those documents. They'll be in the meeting packet. There is also a mailing list for anyone who's interested in ADUs or ordinance changes. You can be asked to put on that list. If you just give me your email, I can make sure you get updates and get notifications when we are having meetings related to ADUs.
And Ann, I know you were not there last time that we had the actual testimony, but after that meeting, I do want to say people spoke nicely about both sides of this issue. People came with some really good personal examples of their own family or their own needs. And there was a young man who spoke on behalf of a group, although I don't think he actually said that. And then later in the hallway, he was the group was there and they were younger people. Some of them are stout students, some of them are a little older, than probably 20s and 30s, and they're feeling like they will never own a home. So they're a little disgruntled, but also they're trying to educate themselves about how they can influence the process, which I think is really great. And that's ideally how democracy works. So I spent some time with them, and they did not understand why our supervisor chairperson, Quinn, was not allowing just a bunch of talk in the back. So I explained to them that this is a working meeting and that the people here aren't paid to do that work, that essentially it's part of being a representative to go nitty gritty, page by page, item by item through the proposed accessory dwelling unit changes, and they had not really realized that. And I said, you know, if you want to have a conversation, you should talk to Mr. Quinn and see if you can have a conversation, which is different than being in a formal meeting. But I think it's interesting, and I think they will be back, that they are interested enough in the process to show up. And I think that's a good sign. And that's the kind of community education, self-education that I think the advocacy education group, we have a lot of educating to do that might be able to go past the housing part, but I'll more into like, how does it work and how do I get my voice heard? How do I learn more? So I thought that was actually a really hopeful sign that people showed up and wanted to talk or wanted to interact with our supervisors.
All right, in the interest of time, I'm going to move us along to the toolkit subgroup. Oh, you gotta, yeah, push. It's me from carrying them around.
Did it turn right up here? There we go.
Yeah.
Now we're rolling. Cool. We haven't met recently, but Ann and I are kind of working offline. Right now where we sit is Golden Shovel Agency, which is Momentum West's web service provider, is going to get me a quote, although it shouldn't be much, on what it's going to cost to develop the template for this. The good news with that, though, is I've been working with Joe Folsom, who is the executive director of the Pierce County EDC. And he has a grant that expires at the end of May, that will probably cover the cost of this, which is awesome. So we'll have two pilots. We'll have the Dunn County and the Pierce County toolkits that will probably be rolling out at the same time so that they can absorb the cost. Also, one of the things that Joe has put together, he's formerly in finance, and he just can't seem to relinquish that passion. He's got about a 20-page piece that he put together that we're going to have as part of this toolkit that doesn't address the actual construction of the home, but addresses all the different aspects of finance pathways, potential assistance programs, et cetera. So that'll be part of the toolkit moving forward as well. So we're hoping to have everything done by the end of May. It looks pretty good. Ann's going to get me the file. She's running into some tech issues as far as being able to get that information pulled back out of the area where it is floating around in the cloud. But as soon as we have that, and Bob, I was going to reach out to you and say, hey, can you reinvent that for us? But we'll hold off on that. But your Post-it notes.
I still have the
That's
exact
great.
thing that he made in my office.
I was telling my wife, I said, I wish I'd taken a picture of that. Yeah. So if you still have that, we might still be alive then, which is excellent. But yeah, we're moving forward with that. And I'm going to take the liberty real quick of mentioning two things too.
Yeah, your conference.
We've been working with Habitat for Humanity St. Croix Valley, and we're putting together, and this is something else that Joe Folsom from the Pierce County EDC has a passion in, because he helped put this together about 25 years ago in Minnesota, a housing cooperative. We're hoping to roll it out in those three counties later this year. Right now, we've got a grant from WEDC to do a feasibility study, as well as map out everything we need to do to get this thing launched, find the participants, et cetera. Once we have it launched there, the plan is for Momentum West to take that model and move that cooperative in this direction, with the focus on working with rural communities on developing affordable housing. Can we drop the cost of a single family house down by $50,000, $60,000 and suddenly make it more affordable? So that's on the horizon. I don't think it's going to happen in Dunn County yet this year, but if we can get it rolling over there, and then we can move it in this direction, the next logical county is Dunn County and Pepin County. So hopefully that will happen. And last but not least, we've got our housing conference coming up June 5th. Last year was at UW Stout. This year it's in New Richmond, but we're focusing on a couple of things that are happening in Dunn County. One being the small home development that the mayor and Mike and the other folks, the city are putting together. But yeah, you're right. There's some neat stuff happening in Dunn County, kind of ahead of the curve here. So that's going to be a focus. That was, sorry, that's just promoting Momentum West event. So I will be quiet now.
No, I think that's very timely. And if people have an opportunity to go on the 5th, I think that would be good. The other thing that I wanted to say about once your toolkit's ready to rock and roll is we should do some sort of media press release promotion. That.
Maybe have Krista do a little video that we could share widely across social media.
That would be cool.
I think those things get more legs, and especially since we're trying to talk to young people and give them some hope. I would love to see something catchy and maybe even humorous and short. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
a possibility.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, toolkit sounds deadly boring until you spice it up somehow.
Yeah, functional but boring.
Okay, and I can do a quick update on the funding subgroup. Diana and I met last week, I believe. Andrew had this thing. It's just like, he just keeps telling us about the election and like it takes up his time. No, Andrew was doing, I don't know what you were doing, canvassing or not canvassing. What do they call that? Is that what it's called? Canvassing? Canvassing. Caucusing, canvassing. I get those two confused. All right, he was doing that. So he was unable to join us, but Diana and I met. Interesting, that is, we just started picking away at funding related to housing, looking particularly at the individual housing side of things, not so much the developer side of things yet, but the housing or the individual side of it. I mean, like, we unearthed stuff that neither her nor I knew about, even just, a couple hours of working together. So so we left tasked with each of us with doing a deeper dive into a number of resources that we found to be able to start to pull that in together, and still have to sort of decide what that will look like. I think honestly, it will kind of probably look like your toolkit, except on the funding side. And I think, again, is something that's replicatable for other counties, because a lot of it, I mean, there are a few things that are Dunn County specific, but there's a whole lot of stuff that's out there that's.
I should share what Joe put together with you so you can take a look at that.
That would be great.
Yeah,
That would
I'll
be great.
forward that to you.
Okay.
And you should also talk to Sarah Sipple because she's got all those federal grants at her fingertips. She keeps sending them my way, and I'm like, I don't have. All I can do is try and forward them on, but she's just ridiculous flood of information. So if we wanted to look at some ways to help individuals via some grant opportunities.
Right. And Paula has offered to be the grant administrator for any federal grant that we got, because she had such a great experience with
Everybody
CDBG.
loves those, right?
Yeah. So there's some things that are happening with that. In light of our conversation and talking about messaging, one of the things that Diana had talked about, and I threw it on the agenda just for conversation, was, and I think I'd defer to Christina to give us some feedback as well, but we talked about, was there a task, perhaps not related to a subgroup, or maybe, but was there a task that could be accomplished by putting together a small group of individuals, I'm thinking 2 or 3 individuals, and one-on-one approaching local developers to talk about Dunn County and our interest, and what would they need to come here? And I know, Christina, you've provided, some like their obstacles, but like, I think more of, I was thinking more, but it was just a Chris Corporal, the thought was just kind of that relationship engagement. Hey, we would like things to be different here. How do we start? And not doing it as a group invite to a handful of developers, but really just one-on-one. Hey, Mr. Developer, Mrs. Developer, would you meet with us for lunch and just let us pick your brain?
Yeah, I think that might be a good approach. I think that there's a couple that are probably more willing to have that conversation than others, and it's finding the right ones. I think part of it would be also looking at targeting who you would like to have come into Dunn County and do developments, or the types of developments you want to have, because there's some that are going to be bigger than others, smaller, etc. Twin homes versus single family, etc. So I think some of that is like looking at targeting a little bit, and maybe having some conversations about who you would like to try to engage with. I know part of it is going to come down to funding and infrastructure. That's a big one. That's always going to be a piece of that discussion. So
Yep. So, I think just sort of planting that seed on the education and advocacy side, I don't know that we have to do something with that. I think let us kind of wrap up some of these things that we're working on and doing. Sounds like toolkit will be done here shortly. I think funding will be well on its way within another month or so. But I think that that might be a next, and I apologize, I moved, how do you move this meeting specifically for Eric Atkinson to be able to join us? And then he went off and had a medical procedure that took him out of the office for 2 weeks. So, some knee work. So, he will be back. But I certainly see the city as a key piece of that, but I don't know. Whenever I feel like I've run into a roadblock, I always circle back to my social work roots, which are all about relationship, and engagement, and getting people to the table to start to talk about, if time, energy, and resource are no limits, what would it take to do this? And usually come up with some pretty creative ideas. So if you have interest in that and being a part of that kind of conversation, let me know, and I will, when Eric's up and running again, pun intended, we'll start to think about that and maybe circle back and spend some time with Christina, just picking her brain about who's out there and who might be a good fit for us. All right. Anything else that we need to accomplish today?
Chris,
Yeah.
when you say you want to engage with developers, are we talking about single family homes or a development, or what are we looking for?
All of the above.
Okay. 'Cause I think I just gave out the last 2 driveway permits for Timber Valley.
Mhm.
I believe will be full now.
Well, full.
Which lots, Bob? Oh, there are 3 that he still owns that he hasn't built on.
I don't have the book here with my records, but one is on the north or the west at the end of the cul-de-sac.
Yep, on the hill,
Yep. And the other one is on the
on the way.
east
down.
side, down the hill on
Right at the bottom.
east side of the road,
Or is it?
around the curve.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a flat slab house going in there.
By the pond.
Yep.
Retention pond. Cause he still has the one on the way down the hill on the left.
I think there's already a driveway permit there. Isn't there?
Oh, yeah, you've been using that.
Yeah.
First, for dumping crap.
Yeah. Yep. And they're gonna be taking the dirt from that
Yeah.
down to the bottom of the hill by the pond,
By the pond.
because they're gonna flatten that out to put a slab home on there.
A lot of dirt in there.
Yeah.
Sidetrack, sorry. Just curious. How
But
this break down.
That's where we're at as far as the development.
Yeah, and I think like that's just like, it's just kind of that, I think, again, starting to establish relationships. So I had, before Eric had surgery, we were talking about down along where Nonic Brewery is, and down along that stretch along the river there, and like what prime development space that is. And then we were talking about how, if you go to Prescott, or you go to really anywhere along the river, along the Mississippi or the St. Croix, you get these, 3 or 4 story condo kind of places, along that it's like, and like, that's like ideal spot. And he said, well, The city has to some work to do with their zoning as well because they have height restrictions. And they want to do some work to change some of that or look at some of that. Maybe not change it, I don't know, but at least look at it. But like when I think about aging in place, and I think about having this, we've talked about this before, a 4-bedroom home that I literally don't need. I use a third of it, at any given point in time. But there is literally nowhere to move, where I would love a condo on the river, or a whatever, townhouse or apartment on the river, and with a group of like-minded, hopefully wealthy, good-looking men. But if they don't exist, well, then I guess we'll just have to go with a bunch of old ladies like me. But yeah, so anyway, so I think that there's just like, I think Bob, sort of all of the above, like, when you think about, when you drive around, we've talked about this before, when you drive around literally kind of anywhere else in the Chippewa Valley, there's building all over the place. And we don't have that. We have the 2 developments now going in the city here, as Eco and Estover or whatever it's called. And that'll, that's good. That's going to take a nice big bite out of some need, but
And there's a few going on like different sides of towns, the one you've been talking about, and there's one west of town, off of 29, and there's one just happening on BB north of town that I drive by on the way to my relative's cabin. So I think there's a few things going on, but it is noticeable that our county appears to be paused while
Mhm.
everybody else has got cranes and they're going up. So the density of housing makes it a lot more affordable if you share those curb and sewer and water and walls. So if we want families to be housed, we should be thinking about some more density and not just single family homes are important, but other kinds of homes are also important.
Well, this is an off-the-wall idea for a development, but I would like to see flat slab, entryway houses with a community building that you could rent a space for a workshop in. And that would
Yeah,
satisfy
you
mine.
need to have a storm shelter. That's what the little home thing is going on, I think, in the city will be on slab with a shared storm cellar, shared community
Yeah.
room, party room type of thing.
Yeah, and I don't think that's not really that far off the wall. If you look at what they're doing up in Osceola with it's either Osceola or it's north of there in St. Croix Falls. But they've got a tiny home community and it's a lifestyle community.
Gardening
it's-
focus and
Yeah,
stuff.
I mean, it's all about gardening.
Share
It's-
equipment.
Yeah, in a common space. So what you're talking about is being done elsewhere. How could we do that here?
We
Well,
could
and
do it.
I know
Yeah.
that when I say this, because it's the first thing that I said to Mayor Knack when he said it, was like, oh my gosh, that's like a zoning nightmare. But he's talked about all of the alternative kinds of housing that exist, straw houses and 3D houses and yurts and, et cetera, et cetera. And how do you create space for someone to be able to create inexpensive housing without creating a zoning catastrophe?
Just throwing it out there, there's manufactured homes now that are gorgeous and much better built than the previous ones. So
Mhm.
neighbors would not look at them and go,
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I think we need to not be so snooty about, we can't have that in our community. We need to be a little more open to look at the pictures and see how gorgeous some of these nicer built places are. And people used to be against small for a while. I don't know if you remember that. Our town, our city, and our county was against small homes, and we wanted big lots, big homes. And now we have all these people who are pushing back and saying, but I just want a small home. So we need to have something for everybody. We do need some big homes here too. We need some big homes for people with big salaries. We need both.
So yeah, looking at opportunities for developments where you can have a mix of both, I think is really important. And looking at, when we look at the future vision for Dunn County, you want to preserve that ag line land. You want to preserve the areas that you do want the more rural character, but that also means you need to identify areas for that higher density and where that makes sense, even if the neighbors don't necessarily agree. but the community as a whole needs to look at what's in the best interest for the county so that you can preserve and have the best use of land to have what everybody wants to some extent, and everybody has that opportunity. And so I think that's really important. And this is great conversation, but I think that's really important to look at as going forward, as Dunn County looks at the comprehensive plan and things like that too, to be looking at identifying that. Because as we talk about like developers coming in, all these ideas you're talking about are all great ideas. The key is getting and sitting down and honestly, like having these conversations, Chris, that you're talking about with developers. It's almost like you almost need to have an idea or a piece of land that's like, hey, this is going to be coming up. Let's start having conversations with developers to see if somebody's willing to look at this and work with us. What do they need to make this happen? What can we do as a county? Is there things we need to do differently? And it can be looking at even 2-3 years down the road. I mean, it's not something that's going to happen next year, but starting to look at where is that land that's going to be coming available for future development, and then starting to have those conversations now. Like senior condos and townhouses and twin homes are honestly some of the biggest in demand items throughout the area. And so I could definitely see those being hugely popular in Dunn County as well.
Right, because we're all getting old.
Kristen?
Yep.
That map that I gave you,
Yes.
that is done by the city town group, which is the towns that virtually touch the edge of the city of Menominee. And it takes some studying on your part to look at it to understand what's going on there. But that map is available from the city in a larger form, which I have hanging in the town hall. This is just a working map. It has some changes on it, but it does identify where we would like to see houses, where we'd like to see commercial, we'd like to keep as ag land. And that might be the best place to start.
And the city just, their council just approved the creation of their next district, which encompasses some really nice buildable area. So I think that will be helpful as well. All right. Promising to keep you on time. Next meeting, how about, can we stick at 11 o'clock? Does that work okay? Okay, how about May 14th at 11 a.m.? All right, it's the second, we're back to the second Tuesday, we're just at 11 instead of 9. And with that, unless there's anything else for the good of the group, I think we're adjourned. Thank you all. Oh, crap.
I'm reading through